it became clear to me that the best venture firms in the world were local. They were hyper local. The Sequoias and the Benchmarks, they are incredibly good at owning the ecosystem between San Jose and San Francisco. But as it stretches out, you see that there are firms that own their own ecosystems, and for us, that was that mission. And in addition to that, there hadn't been a new venture capital firm started in the Seattle area focusing on Series A investments in 20 years, and so sort of a dream opportunity for us.
Welcome to Venture Voices, where we interview emerging managers in the venture ecosystem. I'm Richard Kerby, a partner at eVentures, and today we have the pleasure of having Brendan Wales from Fuse. Brendan, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Rich.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you making time, man. And yeah, I guess we could just jump right into it. It'd be great to just learn more about, the Brendan background and what led you to become a partner at Fuse.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, I just wanted to say what an incredible job you've done in your career. I was thinking back when we originally met. I think it was 2013, meeting at the Creamery, early morning, back when that was the hot spot right near the train station in Soma. And I think you were just joining IVP or something along those lines. So really incredible and inspiring work.
We both come a long way, man. And yeah, the Creamery was a staple of SF venture investing. And I think it no longer exists, but it was a place for a long time.
Oh gosh, I didn't even know that. But my whole career has been really in and around entrepreneurship. When I was 18 years old, my dream was to run a company one day. That's what I thought I was going to be doing. And in some ways I do that now, but a little bit differently than I expected. When I was 23, I moved to San Francisco to work at a venture-backed startup, a business called Zozy, which unfortunately is no longer around. It sold to one of its competitors. Spent 2 years there, and I didn't have enough money to go start a company. And so I said, well, I can either go join another startup and talk to some great companies at the time, or I thought maybe I can get a job in venture capital. But I went to the University of Georgia, and there weren't a lot of people from Georgia who were working at venture capital firms or who had started them. And so I started emailing venture firms cold, and a bunch of people had gotten back to me with my emails that I had sent to them, which listed companies and prospects that they should be talking to. And then I got a great break. I joined a venture firm called eVentures. Now it's called Headline, and got to work with a couple of guys there that were just incredible investors who had been already investing for 13 years. And I got the perfect situation, which was working with folks that already had experience, who hadn't gotten too big yet, and then who had capital to invest in 2012. And that's a dream, being in San Francisco and investing in that arena. I ended up spending 9 years there, which was an amazing ride. But I always had that itch to be the operator of whatever I was doing. And then the opportunity came to be one of the founding partners at Fuse, and jumped at it.
Yeah, then appreciate that context and story, but very similar on my end too. Lots of cold emailing, looking for a venture job on my end too. So I'm glad that it panned out for both of us. And yeah, so Brendan, you mentioned that you were previously at eVentures and Headline prior to launching Fuse with Kellen and Cam. You know, Folks always joke that venture firms with billions of AUM are cushy jobs, and why would one leave them? And so why did you decide to make the leap and leave, eVentures and Headline, to go and start a new firm at Fuse?
I wouldn't say it was ever comfortable, at Headline eVentures, because we were charging uphill. We went from having one strategy and managing a couple $100 million to several billion over those 9 years, and it's all about people and processes and maintaining that culture, which they're phenomenal at. Like the culture maintained itself the entire time, and that's one of the things that makes them special. And for me, it was always hard, and it should be hard. And if it's not hard, you got a big problem. So I don't know who those people are that may say that. I don't know if they'll be VCs for a long time.
No, that's helpful, Brendan. And no, it's great to kind of hear how folks decide, what, I'm ready. I think that's like a really tough question to answer for oneself. I know it was really hard for me to answer personally. And so, what are those characteristics, during the tail end of your Headline timeframe that enable you to believe, what, I am ready. Let's go do this.
I don't know if I necessarily fully felt I was ready until I was here doing it and realizing I know what I'm doing. And that was That's a nice feeling. Like I really do feel like I learned from people who were extremely good at their jobs, right? And so, I think all the checking the boxes of finding the good companies and getting them more money and then outcomes and all of that good stuff, and portfolio construction. You're going through it. But, your expectations are changing as you're there. It's like I want to find a company. I want a company to be good. I want a company to get marked up. I want a board seat. So it's sort of an evolution, and then I think once you're in a different situation, then you feel like, okay, I'm fully ready. But I don't know if anybody's really ready for the experience of what it takes to go down this path. I mean, obviously the fundraising is something that's a totally different beast, and something that I wasn't all that involved with, at my prior firm. And so for me, it was, going back to, doing something small from the beginning, and that's a tough decision, obviously, if you've been somewhere for a long time. And the bar was incredibly high. I was only going to do something like this if I felt like whatever we were going to go do was going to be defensible in the long run. And my partners, Kellen and Cameron, were the ones who came up with the idea, and we can touch on it a little bit, which was really focusing on the Seattle ecosystem as the core playbook. And at first, I'll be honest with you, I was like, gosh, I just don't know if there's enough meat on that bone. What's the benefit of being local, really? And as I did my work, and we can talk more about, how we think about our defensibility, it became clear to me that the best venture firms in the world were local. They were hyper local. The Sequoias and the Benchmarks, they are incredibly good at owning the ecosystem between San Jose and San Francisco. But as it stretches out, you see that there are firms that own their own ecosystems, and for us, that was that mission. And in addition to that, there hadn't been a new venture capital firm started in the Seattle area focusing on Series A investments in 20 years, and so sort of a dream opportunity for us.
Yeah, no, I think you kind of started to answer my kind of next question there, but you mentioned local owning it, a geo. What about Seattle and maybe the broader Pacific Northwest, led you and the team to say, you know what, this is an opportunity. It's overlooked, and we think could be ours for the taking.
So my partners were at Ignition, and so they were living up in Seattle already, but hadn't been the constraint of the regional focus. And as they were operating Ignition, ultimately Ignition decided to wind down. It became clear that there had been this incredible basket of businesses that had been started there, and they were investors in some of those great businesses, the DocuSigns of the world, for example. But there were also a bunch of companies that they hadn't invested in, like Auth0, which sold for $6.5 billion to Okta. And so for us, it was, well, if we had just focused on this region and we were the best in the world at finding these companies early on, getting to know them, and then working on partnering with them, then we could generate great returns for limited partners over an extended period of time. And I do want to touch on that, which is, in the investing business, you have to be willing to do things that other folks won't do. And that's the only way you're going to be able to beat people over the long period of time. I mean, we just do things that don't scale, right? Every single day, we are working to meet folks who are at day zero or day minus 3 years from starting their companies. And that's the way we operate our business. And we think other firms will never do that. They don't live here. So it's really hard. And that's how we think we can generate great returns in the long run.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense there, Brendan, as well. And you mentioned, hey, your two partners were, Seattle based previously, with Ignition, an established brand in the actual, Seattle locale. What led you to get comfort with, joining two folks that know each other super well, have worked together for a while, and then this guy named Brendan wants to join the team all of a sudden and be the third person to kind of start the firm. So how'd that come about, and how'd you get comfort with doing so?
Yeah, so my partner Callan and I have been extremely close for a long time, dating back to 2014. Actually, we met on a next gen wine tasting trip, which maybe you're on that. I think it's got an entirely different name now. And so maybe the EVCA. But and so we met, we became really close friends. And so he used to spend a lot of time in the Bay Area sourcing investment opportunities. And what we ended up doing is we would host dinners together. Whenever he was in town, we would couple our networks. We would pull in people that we wanted to get to know better, whether it be other investors or operators and company founders, to get to know them. And it was always this thing of, hey, Kellen and I are hosting the dinner. Little did everyone know it was always Kellen and I. And so we became really close. We co-invested together on a business called iCertis, which is a big company here, most recently valued at $6 billion. And then I got to know Cameron. I spent quite a bit of time getting to know Cameron, and then we all had a similar ethos and operating style, and said, "Hey, let's do this. This could be a good thing." Now it's a marriage, as you know. You have a partner; it's your second marriage, and you got to put a lot of work into it, and it takes everybody evolving to be able to make it work in the long run.
Yeah, no, no, Kellen's great. Knew him in my SF days as well, and I think he has the award for me, at least, in being the only venture investor I know that's actually from Montana, as opposed to getting wealthy and buying a home in Montana. And so,
That's right.
Kellen's awesome, and I'm glad that you guys are all partnering together and excited for what you guys are building with Fuse. And yeah, I guess one more, topic or question around the geo piece.
Mhm.
You're not native to Seattle. You mentioned Georgia, born and bred and gone to UGA, and so how did you moved to Seattle for Fuse, which is obviously a testament to the opportunity you saw there, but
Mhm.
how to be able to immerse yourself in a new ecosystem and developing trust amongst founders, other investors, brand, deal flow, despite not being native?
Yeah, and this is a little bit of our secret sauce, and where we think a lot of the defensibility comes from, which is when the firm was started, rather than going to traditional institutions to raise the capital, which is extremely hard. So I'm not saying that's an easy thing to do. We went to individuals, primarily operators and executives that live here locally, to the two several hundred of these executives that run some of the most important companies in the world that are our LPs. And we can touch a little bit more about how we engage with them. But moving here and having that foundation for me, it was just sitting there, on the tee, ready to go. And so I've never felt like it was hard to get ingrained because it's so inherent to what we do. I always say, what we really have is a network effects business. And every single meeting we have, whether it be a prospect because it's local, or if it's a really talented individual that's thinking of leaving a company, that's extremely beneficial to us. I mean, they can go work at our portfolio companies. If we're talking to a high net worth individual and they could be an LP in the fund, we could also get them to go work at our portfolio companies. We could reach out to them for potential customer introductions. And so you get that hyper network and that the benefit of really everything that we're doing, where there's not a lot of wasted time here at Fuse. And then we're in the office every single day grinding together. So that's another important part of it all.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be local, you got to be all in. And so
Yeah.
it makes sense that you guys are in the office and spending time with the founders, investors, and it sounds like, individual LPs in the area as well. Um, and I guess, switching gears here, I heard, through the grapevine about some like exciting news that you guys have raised your second fund. And you mentioned, your LP base a little briefly, but it'd be great to just hear more about, fund two, what the strategy is, fund size, how you thought about constructing the LP base via fund one to fund two.
Mhm. Yeah, so Fund One is a 2020 vintage. It's a little over $170 million. Exact same strategy. We're doing the exact same thing in Fund Two as we did in Fund One, which is backing great entrepreneurs from day one through Series A. This sounds overly simplistic, but we want to look at companies when they're at day zero, day 100, day 300, day 500, day 1,000. In one circumstance in Fund One, we've known the guy for almost 8 years before we invested, and that's the whole model, right? And whether we invest at 10 pre or 20 pre or 50 pre, uh, that is inherent to what we do, and we want to be the best in the world at navigating those investment opportunities. And we lead every single time. We obviously, for you know the game. You do have to have significant ownership in these businesses. And we had 24 investments in Fund One. And Fund Two, it's $250 million, and exact same model. Have 30 to 35 companies, leading investments from day one through Series A.
Awesome. Well, congrats to the three of you plus the broader team.
Yeah.
One, raising a $170 million fund one is nothing to sneeze at. And then two, being able to show the proof points to get you up to 250 on fund two is awesome. And you guys definitely have the war chest to hopefully go win that Seattle Pac
Mhm.
Northwest. And so
Yeah.
kudos to you guys and the team there.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I guess, lots of AUM now relatively to, a fund two firm. still relatively a new firm,
Mhm.
Fuse, it'd be great to hear how the firm has evolved since inception and what changes, if any, you made to the team, process, portfolio support, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm. Yeah, so when we started the firm, it's the three of us, and then we have three operating partners. So John Connors, who was the former CFO of Microsoft, board member of Nike and Splunk, really one of the foremost board members in the Pacific Northwest. He ran Ignition for a long time, and he was instrumental in helping us get going and opened up his network and support and helps us work with our portfolio companies. We also added Sapir Kanuja, who was early at Amazon, spent 7 years there, and then started a company here called Datasphere, which he built and sold. And he's in the weeds working with our portfolio companies as well. And then we also added Bobby Wagner, which I know you wanted to touch on, who is really the most high profile athlete in Seattle. He's the middle linebacker, 8-time all pro linebacker, but he's also the startup feed. He loves investing. He loves technology. It's funny. He was actually an intern at Ignition during the off season, and so when Fuse he said, "I want to have more involvement," and he's been extremely instrumental, and he's in every single board meeting or every single partner meeting. And then we have three associates who are doing a great job learning the business out in the community, getting to know folks, and that goes back to our ethos of no stone left unturned. We need to know every single person who's thinking about starting a company in this one place, and that does require people and time. And so we've invested heavily in that.
Yeah, I think that last point you mentioned is a pretty important one on no stone left unturned. Because I imagine, whether it's LPs or others, folks will think, okay,
Huh.
you've narrowed yourself down to Seattle or Pacific Northwest. So, Brendan, Kellen, team, you better not miss anything in this geo.
Mhm.
And so
Right.
how do you think about ensuring that like whatever is the best to come will come through the Fuse doors first and Fuse can win versus, let's say, us other, venture firms that want to fly in and swoop in for a deal and take over?
Yeah. You know, for one, it's about brand and reputation, right? We're local. Like these people are our neighbors, our friends. We need to do everything, with the utmost respect when we're meeting with founders. It's fast follow ups with whatever it is we told them we would do, whether it be an update on whether or not we want to invest or following up on potential customer introduction or hire. That is really key. That customer experience needs to be perfect all the time. We don't go to bed without having answered an email from somebody that we told we would do. Um, the next is that LP community. We really are embracing them at all points in time for connecting us with entrepreneurs, friends of theirs that used to work at Microsoft and Amazon and Nike, all these iconic companies that are based here. And then it's the blocking and tackling of reaching out to folks on LinkedIn that have put stealth founder on their profile and they live in Portland or they live in Seattle or they live in Vancouver, the markets that we care about. We're obsessed with making sure that they know us. And that means, me cold emailing people, going through the whiteboard that we have on our on our wall and list the companies that haven't responded to the analysts. Like that's what I do in my spare time. And that's the stuff that other folks won't do. To them, it's not worth the time. We think a lot of times about, whether people are coming up here and maybe beating us in investment opportunities. That's our fault. If that happens, it's because we didn't put the work in, put the time in. We need to be building great relationships with these founders. We need to know their businesses better than other folks, so that when we do issue a term sheet, they know they're getting a great partner. um, that's just a few examples of what we're doing every day, but it's definitely it's blocking and tackling.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys are working quite hard there, and love the fact that you're throwing everything at the wall to ensure that you see everything, you win, and
Mhm.
also take accountability when you've lost and learn
Mhm.
from that and figure, okay, how do you prevent that from happening next time? And so, really resonates with how you guys are going about that. And you touched on two things I want to go back to. I'll do the first one here. You mentioned Sean Connors, Bobby
Mhm.
Wagner. It seems like you've put together a unique mix of experiences and backgrounds
Mhm.
from, seasoned operators,
Yeah.
athletes, broad LP base with operational experience. It'd be great to understand how this diverse group of folks within the Fuse ecosystem, whether they're full time or not, have contributed to the Fuse offering to founders.
Yeah, for sure. It's we're very thoughtful about how we bring people in. Like, as you know, the experience within the partner meeting is something that needs to be properly managed. We all have experience from different firms and try to take the best things from both. And so we're not going to just add somebody to that room if it has any potential risk of messing up that experience. With John, you get that big company operator experience. He knows what the biggest companies in the world do to operate at the highest level. He was at Microsoft, really during its first heyday. Now it's obviously it's back to the top. It feels like, and then he's also seen startups from day one to become massive businesses. So that's really key. Having somebody that ran an early stage startup with Sapir is also mission critical. Like our team, we're really obviously we're founders of Fuse and we operate that business, but we never ran a startup, a software company together. And so having Sapir there, who brings, I mean, we bring as much empathy as possible, but he's been in the shoes, and so having that is really key. And then Bobby, it's about community engagement. This guy is just an absolute superstar. It's like having Michael Jordan on your team and running a firm in Chicago. And so if he's texting you saying, "Hey, guy, Fuse guys love you. Let me know how I can help. Let me see if I can, help get you a recruit over the line, whatever it may be. Do you want to come to spring training? You want to go to a game?" That sort of thing, it does matter. Goes a long way. And it's a unique edge that we fully embrace. But we have to invest in him, right? We have to keep him up to speed. We do the partner meetings on Tuesday afternoons so he can join when he's not in practice.
That makes sense. And I think the varied experiences and backgrounds goes a long way because there are multiple ways in which folks can be helpful to portfolio companies. And if you can try and cover as many bases as possible, you're going to provide that best, product experience to your customer in this scenario, that being the founder. And so love what you put together from a team perspective there. And the second question I want to circle back to is actually one that comes from one of your LPs. And so
Yeah.
was catching up with a car over at Fairview, and he mentioned you guys do a really good job of being creative and keeping your LP base active and engaged.
Mhm.
What's been the secret to like keeping LPs kind of activated, engaged, and adding value to the firm and the portfolio companies in the firm?
First and foremost, it's about transparency, right? And being willing to open yourself up to feedback from your investors. And it comes in the form of us just being hyper communicative about really everything that we're doing. That most of that comes in the form of our investments. And so we took the philosophy from day one, which is the moment we're wiring capital into a company, our LPs know exactly what that company does, why we invested in that business, what types of people those companies are hiring, types of customers they're looking for, a blurb that they can send to those prospective folks that can help move the needle. And every time we send out one of those emails, we'll get 30 to 40 responses from our limited partners saying, "Hey, I know the chief procurement officer here, or I know the head of customer success here. Let me make the introduction." And that's an absolute dream. Now, of course, we've had situations where they say, "Oh, well, I don't love that category," but that's totally fine, and let us learn from let us learn from that. That was working so well. We then created a mobile app for our LPs. This 2 years ago, we then pumped all the data into our Fuse app, where our LPs can read our memo. They can see how much we own. We do a podcast with all the CEOs. And so an LP wants to know, "Hey, what's going on with Fuse?" Like they can spend the 20 minutes listening to the podcast we did, and they can follow up with us to help move the ball forward for the companies. And it's been really fun. I think a part of it, the reason why it works so well is because once again, they're our neighbors. They're right here. A lot of times we're the only venture firm that they're an investor in. And it's been really fun.
That's terrific. I guess in terms of a mobile app for LPs, and this is the first time I've actually even
Mhm.
heard of that. And so
Mhm.
can you tell us about, is it internal staff? Is it, actually outsourced? How have you kind of developed this app, and what exactly is in there? You alluded to investment memos. It sounds
Mhm.
like, portfolio listings, what's in there to provide the transparency that you're seeking to your LPs while also giving them the best chance to be helpful to you and the team.
Yeah, so we used a third party tool to help us get up and running. Building a proprietary app like this, especially at first, we didn't know how it would go and whether or not people would actually download it. It turned out to be a huge success. But it's got just a lot of detail, right? It's like, hey, this is the founder. This is what the company does. This is exactly how much we own. This is exactly how much we've invested. This is obviously the memo where they can read into more detail. And then they can see every single company across each fund. And then depending on which funds they're in, they can obviously, they have access to either one. And then obviously that requires some level of upkeep, but all of it is a part, everything that we're doing is sort of a part of the puzzle, right? So the content that we have that they're seeing in the app is from the email that we send out to everybody once we make the investment. The podcast that we put in the app is from the podcast that we do with every CEO when we do it. The content from the podcast is for the website, so you can see the Q&A with the CEOs, so founders can see the types of investments that we do. There's multiple purposes for all of the content, and then there's just simply provisioning the application to display it to the LPs. But it's not like we have to do an extra 10 things to make it, have enough information.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. I imagine once this gets published and folks start listening, you'll have a number of GPs reach out looking to emulate what you guys have done on the app. Because I think the transparency side, I think, is awesome. Because one, yes, you're going to get the LPs to feel more comfort in the investment in you, but two, actually adding additional value to the founders. And I think three, I think increases your ability to kind of continue to raise those subsequent funds when you've said, hey, our plans to X and you've done X. And then hopefully the rest obviously falls in line. But
Yeah.
you guys are very, very, it's key. You're very, very intentional about having a partnership with your LPs rather than view them solely as capital, which is great.
Yeah, and I think too, it's fun for the institutions probably aren't used to that, right? But because that the first, gosh, 20, $30 million of fund one was just from individuals, that it was just always, it's just always a part of us, of how we operate. I think we also probably take a little bit of a different approach to operating the firm as it relates to communication with all external parties. Like Callum, Cam, and we're copied on everything, right? And if we sort of, I always joke, it's like we're a Zendesk help desk, or employee and customer success, where it comes into the inbox and it's just like Brendan Keller, okay, I'm answering, right? And if someone's on vacation, it works really well, or if someone's traveling or on the airplane, it works really well, and then the LPs know, hey, like these folks are all in and they're together on the mission.
Yeah, no, that's great. And yeah, maybe we change, directions here and go internal to Fuse. And so,
Mhm.
many firms operate very differently. How do deals get done at Fuse? Is there a voting threshold? Is required to get a deal done? Is it individual GP conviction? How do you guys operate and, eventually get to a yes or an opportunity?
Mhm. Well, it all starts with transparency, across the company. So on Monday mornings, I mean, we review every single company that every single person met together, right? And we sit in that room and we talk about every single one. And obviously, they're prioritized by what we think is the highest quality to things that are a little bit less urgent or exciting. So everybody knows what's going on. From there tends to be one or two GPs that gravitate towards a specific company, plus an analyst or associate or multiple of them, who are then moving the ball forward for them. That way, like, everyone knows whether or not I'm excited about something. It's not like out of the blue, I'm like, hey, like I want to invest in this, AI company or whatever it may be. They know, and they're typically helping out. And then we're doing diligence together and pinging folks. So pinging our LPs to say, hey, have you used this or have you thought about this problem before? It is consensus driven. We're not voting at the end of the day. And at the, I'm totally fine if I don't like a deal or an investment and Kellen doesn't like it. I'm fine if Cameron wants to do that. I think that's fantastic. And a lot of it does come through that level of excitement. Of course, we are managing risk as an investment manager, and so the amount of capital we put into things can vary depending on how much risk we think is within that specific company, and or how much upside we think that is possible within the company. So if there's a lot of risk, but there's also a ton of upside, we don't have to put $10 million into a company. Like maybe the right investment amount on that business is, $5 million or something smaller. And so it's a constant discussion around what the exact investment looks like. And we come to that decision together.
Perfect. No, that makes sense. And maybe pushing that ball a little further there.
Mhm.
It'd be great if you could just, walk us through, a recent investment that Fuse has made and, why did you or the team ultimately decide to say yes?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just invested in a business called Quandary, which is a business that automates processes within the insurance vertical. So insurance brokerages, they work obviously with end clients who need insurance needs. They come to the broker to help work through proposals from various insurance carriers. Well, insurance carriers are quite antiquated as it relates to software. They tend to not have APIs. Most of the information that comes from carriers comes in the form of PDFs. And so these insurance brokerages have huge teams that all they're responsible for doing is taking these documents from insurance carriers and then pulling the information out and then providing that information to the broker to be able to call the client. Well, because it's so time consuming, these brokers tend to not call you. They never call you and say, "Hey, like we can save you money," because they don't have any time. And so that's what Quandary does. They take all this information out of the carrier documents. They help the brokerage maintain and manage those documents, and then they can then provide a better service to the end client because they can automatically look at a renewal. They can go get new quotes in a more efficient manner. And we think that there's a big opportunity around verticalized RPA. And we've got some great folks as LPs that come from UiPath and some other business process automation systems. And so we validated with that with them. We're on that thesis. They were excited as well. And that's a founder that we got to know over 6 months. We saw there was a small seed round that we missed. And I was so annoyed that we didn't know the company. And then over the next 6 months, we courted him, and then we led the Series A before we went out to the market.
Awesome. No, that's great how obviously you're bummed you missed the seed round, but once again, going back to the importance of being local, you could stay on top of that founder and team thereafter. And it sounds like because of that ability, you were able to kind of effectively preempt the Series A round, which, effectively rules out competition and that local play, sounds like it played a big hand in that.
Yeah, you guys have chosen the path of being really thematic, and for us, it's local. I do think it's extremely hard to not contain the pond you're fishing in, or very clearly define the pond you're in, and you have to believe in it. There better be good companies in that pond or good fish, and then you got to figure out how to be the best fisherman in that specific pond, and that's sort of how we think about the world, and we're very comfortable with the size of the pond and the fish in it. Um, But for some people, they take a very different approach. I think I'd have a hard time going to a world of infinite prospects. I think it's really very difficult to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, leave it to a Seattle-based venture firm to use a fishing analogy. Very,
Mm,
very apt.
yeah.
And yeah, I guess, obviously, none of these companies are generally, straight up to the right continuously.
Mhm.
And so, you know, startups fail, they've got setbacks and whatnot. It'd be great if you could just share a particular investment story where it seemed like the company might have been on the path to not working, shutting down, have had obstacle struggles, but
Mhm.
ultimately did become successful. I think those stories are always worth to highlight as well, because that to me is what most of these stories actually look like, despite what we see in the external.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many of them, and I'm like a broken record internally because I talk about these all the time. And I think that, for one, before we go into the example, I think a lot of investors who are earlier in their career, they don't fully understand how important it is for uh, to have to have more companies still at work, essentially within a fund, right? Because when you've got the early runners, it's like, oh, great, this is amazing. But the reality is, a lot of those things are going to fall down, and then once the fund is returned, it feels a lot different when you're returning capital, even if the outcomes are a bit smaller. So every single horse matters. We really take that serious here, and we never give up on these businesses. A great example, it's a business that we invested in when I was at Headline, is a business called House Call Pro. It's a leader in SMB software for home services. This is a company that was doing Uber for home services, and we invested in that company in 2013. That was when there was a bunch of other companies doing that, HomeJoy and others. And after about 18 months, it just wasn't working. The company wasn't getting product market fit, really tough category. And together with some of the other investors, we came to the idea of pivoting it to B2B software. This was at the end of 2015. And fast forward 8 years, I mean, this business, they recently raised at $1.3 billion. It's a phenomenal company. All of the SaaS metrics, it's top decile, if not even greater. And that's almost fast. Like, I feel like you pivot, and then within 5 years, that you're this like really durable company that has incredible potential. It's just a reminder to not give up. And I shared that story with the team, and I was like, if people hadn't called the company and said, "Hey, I think we should look at this other avenue," I mean, that was just a zero. And for the LPs, it's a huge thing too, right? And so it matters. Even any inkling around ways to improve it, it's worth the phone call.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% there. And to me, I just find those stories to be so rewarding because you see the founder and team giving their lifeblood tears to make something work. It looks like it's going in the wrong direction. They pivoted, figured something out, and to see it become a success is just like you feel just so awesome for the folks on board in that team that have been able to execute in in that fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then maybe last kind of like deal related question here is, you know, I find that, when you join the board of a company, you work with investment, you've made the investment, you wired the money, and then you learn a lot in the first quarter or 2 quarters of that business. And so putting aside the bad stuff, what do you look for to in those first quarter or two or first 1 or 2 board meetings to make yourself feel like, okay, we made the right choice here?
I find it to be the free like the pace, the pace of response on everything, whether it's the board meeting or really the first meeting. It's like if we're talking about something, how quickly do they do that? And what is the level of execution? Is it really high quality, or is it not really well thought through? I've got a founder that we backed 5 months ago, doing really well, and then he had an idea of acquiring some companies in the space, and like within the next week, I mean, he had a full market map. He'd already talked to the companies, like that level of just like, I'm going to get this done. I'm going to run through a brick wall to get this thing to do whatever it is that we talked about. Like that's the key. And I think that there's a in this market, that's what later stage investors have to have, right? If they feel like this leader is not going to go to the ends of the earth to make this work, or if the ambition's not there, like, there is no $30 million check waiting for those people. And so might as well give that feedback to the founder sooner than later. And you can sense it, right? I mean, as you know, when you're talking to a company and you ask for, if they want you to invest, if they want equal to invest and you haven't, and it takes them 5 days to send you a Google sheet with like their P&L, I mean, that's an issue. Because would you ever do that for an LP? No. I mean, we have a whole rule here. It's like the follow-ups for the LP meeting are done that night, right? Like it's just the only way to operate.
No, I think you're exactly right. And responsiveness, communication is key. I think you because that also tells you what the interaction would be like post investment, and so you don't want the founder responding 2 weeks later on something, and it's either that you're spending time with the wrong founder, or you're not their preferred choice, and they're kind of using you in the back burner there. Neither which is good. And
No,
so
it's not.
um,
It just happened to me.
there you go. We all had
No, it's not.
experiences of these, and we would continue to have those experiences. And so, but we've seen enough times to know, where we sit in that realm. I think.
So I've been asking now, it's like, what do you even want out of it? Right?
Mhm.
Because I do think people need to feel like they want to build something great, but also have ambition around their own lives, right? Like they have this vision around what they're going to be like when they're X age, and they want to do everything it takes to get there. And if that ambition's not there, I mean, I just don't think the company's going to be big either,
Yeah.
right?
Why are you doing this? It is a big question. And I think there are multiple good answers, but it's a question worth asking. And I guess to pull that thread a little further there, how should we think about the founder traits of a Fuse founder? I think every firm, we kind of resonate with different kinds of people. What do you think that the Fuse team resonates with when speaking to individual founders?
For one, it's technical leadership. We are in the home of Microsoft and Amazon, Google Cloud, Oracle Cloud. It's all here. The entire public cloud flows through this one place, right? When we're meeting folks, like we want to feel like these are the creators that can build tools that other folks just can't do, right? These things can't be and shouldn't be easy to build. And ideally, that is piggybacking on some customer insight or problem that they specifically have. But they tend to have a lot of technical depth. We That's something we enjoy, and and now I think that's really the number one thing. I think in building software, like it's very hard to do that well, and that comes back to why we do what we do. It's like we want the guy or woman who's at Microsoft working on whatever it may be to call us and say, "Hey, we have an idea." But yeah, absolutely, come on in. We don't say no. We talk to everybody.
Yeah, that makes sense as well. And, to that point, tech relationships obviously super important when you're investing in
Mhm.
any software or technology or business.
Mhm.
How does Fuse support those founders after investment? You obviously have this large LP base with many operators that can be supportive, but how do you think about a founder coming to you guys and saying, "Yeah, I'm thinking about taking your check here. I've got other things. How are you guys going to make me better?"
Yeah, it depends on the specific person, right? Like, everybody's good at certain things and not great at others, right? And so maybe the person is, well, and it depends on the founding team, right? Some of these founding teams are really well rounded. Others, it could be a sole founder. I think the thing that works the best is getting those founders around other people that have been exceptional, right? If you've never done it before, how are you going to know what an incredible CFO looks like, or a CRO that can take your company from one to 100? I mean, you really have no clue. And so the first thing we do is get those founders in front of those people that have already done the thing before, and then be relentless about helping them fill the roles. If somebody was the chief revenue officer at GitLab, uh, they're not going to go work at that company. Now, they may go work at that company when it's $100 million ARR business, but they can at least give them some insight into go to market and how to think about it. And then from there, it's how do we fill the spots? I mean, we have a whole CRM instance just around local talent that's thinking about moving to another company. And during the partner meeting, we go through every single meeting that every person had talent, and then we pipe it to the companies. It's all about people. It's funny, and as Rich, it's like as every VC that's been doing this for a long time, I'll just say it's about the people.
No, it really is. It really is. And it manifests its ways via different tactics and actions, but at the end, that's what you're trying to solve for. And solving for that correctly takes away lots of mistakes, errors, and increases your chances of being right or being lucky, however you want to define it, exponentially.
Yeah, one of our CEOs, I was like, hey, look, the CFO, it's just not working, for me. He's like, he's like, thank you. He's like, I have no clue. I don't know. I mean, he's doing fine to me. And I'm like, we're not even on the right spectrum right now on quality. And so it makes a change.
Yeah. No. And yeah, sometimes it means you have to make, tough conversations, like you mentioned, House Call Pro. Like no one I'm sure likes to hear, hey, you guys aren't going in the right direction. But if that's the convo that changed the directive of coming from going to 0 to a billion, always worth having that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think a part of it is like your love for the game. Like, you and I have been doing this a long time. And I think it can be hard because your most updates are bad updates like with the companies. And so it's like if you just focus on that, uh, that's not a whole lot of fun, right? And so keeping that level of excitement for those companies is key.
Yeah, I think it's hard. Companies are routinely misplan because obviously being aggressive, but it's hard to, you don't never want to bring a negative attitude consistently to a founder when they may know it's tough. They're struggling with it every day. And so
Yeah,
finding ways to be helpful and positive, I think, just gets you goodwill with founders, and then that hopefully replicates to yourself with other people. And then they can just share how great it's been working with Brendan, whether or not the company is a
yeah,
great exit or not, I should say.
yeah, exactly.
Um, and you mentioned, you're in Seattle, Microsoft, Amazon, lots of AI going on there as
Mhm.
well. Obviously AI has been talked about nonstop at the moment. Seattle area seems to be a market with tons of AI talent,
Mhm.
obviously because of the two companies you mentioned there. Is that an area of emphasis and focus for the firm as a result? Or how do you think about that given the locale and just the large talent pool around you?
Yeah, it is, and it's core to what we do. We always say, we invested into the fastest growing generative AI companies before it was even a term, back in 2021, and that we think comes from keeping the ears to the ground. If we're going to be in one of the most tech rich ecosystems in the world, there are going to be bleeding edge technology companies that are founded here, and we saw that really early on. We think there's a couple categories that we're really excited about it. Vertical RPA. We've already talked about that. Privacy and enterprise readiness in and around generative AI. We just made an investment in a company in and around that space. We're really excited about. But at the same time, being 5 minutes away from Microsoft, I mean, you don't want to go up against that. That's one heck of a powerful company, and we have a little bit of unique insight there. And so We're cautiously optimistic and excited, but there are certain lanes we got to stay in.
That makes sense there. And I think I'll take a pause on the like, technical venture questions for a second here, maybe switch on a lighter note. And so, reached out to one of your portfolio company founders, Leaf
Mhm.
Magnuson. And his question is that he heard that you routinely shoot over 100 in golf. Is this fact or fiction here?
Uh, that's pretty rough, Leif. I haven't been there probably since I was about 12, but I guess it's still possible.
Oh, awesome, awesome. And then, you and I are big, sports fans, football in particular. And so just to end on a fun note, I know you are a Georgia Bulldog through and through. You guys have now won, two back-to-back national championships. How are you feeling about the three-peat?
Well, for one, Kellen always jokes that whenever I mention I went to the University of Georgia, that I grew 2 inches taller since we started Fuse. Which I don't know if that's a joke about my height or about my excitement about the Bulldogs, but I'd say I'm feeling pretty good. But new quarterback, new offensive coordinator, that's pretty tough. And you got to go up against some new teams. Who knows? I mean, Dion could be the one taking this thing all the way. So you don't want to get in the way of him.
That's right. That's right. Well, I think it's always good for folks to be super proud about where they've, gone to school and, hopefully that those 2 inches of prideness gets you to be Kellen's height too. So,
That's
um,
right.
eh, but yeah, no, I just want to end on one final note here. Brendan, you, Kellen, and Cam are building a great franchise, and so just really appreciate you sharing the Few story, how you're differentiating, how you're trying to own the Seattle and the Pac Northwest Chia, and nothing but success for you guys. Congrats and continue to push on.
Well, thank you for having me. You're an
Awesome,
inspiration to us too. So yeah, beyond grateful.
appreciate that so much, Brendan.